We all grow up learning about the Pilgrims, those devout pioneers with a fondness for black and white fashion. We revere them, having conveniently forgotten that they imposed America's first income tax and outlawed the celebration of Christmas. Maybe we overlook these details because the core of their story is the ideal American narrative, a free people beating impossible odds. But the version we know is as off target as a musket with a bent barrel.
I think there's a need in American culture to idealize the past and to have this notion of the Pilgrims as being this holy, pious, somber people gives a sense of gravitas to our own history and our own foundings and origins. But I think the reality is a lot more interesting and complex.
The accepted story goes something like this. In 1620, the Pilgrims flee England on the Mayflower in search of religious freedom in the New World. Nothing really earth-shaking happens on the voyage, and they reach their destination, landing on history's best-known boulder, Plymouth Rock. The first winter is rough, but the Pilgrims tough it out. They also get an assist from an Indian named Squanto, who teaches them how to plant corn. And after reaping an awesome harvest, they invite a few of the natives to chow down turkey at the first Thanksgiving. There's a cornucopia of errors and distortions in that account. Starting with the Pilgrims' floating icon, the Mayflower. It's the only ship we ever hear about, but the truth is that the Pilgrims have a second ship.
They were originally two vessels, Mayflower and Speedwell. Speedwell proved incapable of crossing the Atlantic and she had to be abandoned.
Whoever named the Speedwell must have had one too many grogs at the village tavern, because the Speedwell leaks like a sieve. So the most it ends up doing is speeding back to England, not once, but twice, on two aborted crossings. That leaves two boatloads of Pilgrims all jammed aboard the crowded Mayflower. And what about this idea that nothing much happened during the ocean crossing? Nothing except a dramatic rescue that profoundly steers the course of American history. During a storm, an obscure indentured servant named John Howland is swept overboard and faces almost certain death.
The reason that he survives is the practice was to drop your sails so there's no strain being put on that ship and it can ride out the seas like a cork. And he is able, when he goes overboard, to grab onto the ropes that are running in the water, and the crew is able to save his life. One of the amazing things is the salvation of that one life has had tremendous impact on the American experience.
John Howland goes on to marry and have children in the New World, setting the roots of an amazing family tree. His direct descendants include 3 U.S. presidents: Franklin D. Roosevelt, George Herbert Walker Bush, and his son, George W., not to mention Mormon prophet Joseph Smith and Mormon patriarch Brigham Young.
Had that one life disappeared, the trajectory of American history would have changed.
And if not for the storm that nearly kills John Howland, the history of America's most celebrated city would have also spun off in a whole new direction. That's because the Pilgrims' intended destination isn't Plymouth, but the mouth of the Hudson River, now the site of New York City. But the storm winds blow them north to Massachusetts, where they make their famous landing at Plymouth Rock, right? Nope. They actually land on Cape Cod.
You have them arriving at the tip of Cape Cod, remaining on the lower Cape about a month before choosing to come and settle at Plymouth. And it's the landing at Plymouth Rock that lingers in the American memory.
But that arrival won't count for much if the Pilgrims blow themselves up before they reach Plymouth. And that almost happens. The culprit is a troublemaking teenager, Francis Billington. Just for kicks, he fires his father's musket inside the Mayflower, showering sparks around an open barrel of gunpowder.
It's no exaggeration that playing with gunpowder that was left nearby could have destroyed the ship.
Only divine providence, as the Pilgrims called it, kept any of those sparks from igniting a catastrophic explosion and putting an end to the story before it had really started. And of course, once they get to Plymouth, the Pilgrims definitely step off the ship onto Plymouth Rock, right? Very doubtful, since the first time anyone mentions the rock is more than a century after the Pilgrims land. The source is a 94-year-old descendant of one of the settlers, who says he got the story from his father.
We do not know that they landed at Plymouth Rock. It's probable that Plymouth Rock was a landmark along the beach, something to guide you. So highly unlikely that people stepped onto the rock.